Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Halloween Live. I'm your host, Michael. I'm joined tonight by Lilith Dorsey, a Voodoo Priestess. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
All right. Would you like to explain what Voodoo is? Just like a summary for some people who might not know, or be a practitioner of it?
It's kind of a huge topic. It's hard to sort of sum it up. I think it's probably easier to tell you what it's not. It's not zombies. It's not lascivious, lustful rituals. It's not vengeance. It's not Chucky dolls. It's not any of that. What it is a ancient traditional religion practiced for at least 4,000 years. Some people say it dates back 8,000 years, coming from West Africa, primarily Benin. And it transported over to the United States and the central and southern US with enslaved people. And it's continued to flourish all throughout the world ever since.
Was this something you were raised in, or did you find a calling for it?
I think that a lot of people had practices they were growing up with that they didn't realize were spiritual practices, things about stirring the soup a certain way or making sure that the first person who walks across the doorstep isn't a redhead. Which, as I got older and older, I realized were really rooted in folklore and if you're more exacting about it, magical practices. So there were a lot of practices I grew up with that weren't necessarily called voodoo per se, but were definitely spiritual beliefs that as I got more and more familiar with people who were open and discussing the religion, I found out that these were things that were practiced in the religion as well.
Okay. And how long have you been a practicing Voodoo Priestess?
Probably about 25 years, maybe a little bit longer. I started formally studying New Orleans style voodoo about 30 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. And I've just, it picked up. I have my own spiritual house here in New Orleans now. And I also have initiations in other types of African traditional religion, like La Regla La Kumi, which people know as Santeria, or Haitian Vodou.
All right, and what are the sort of duties would a priestess do? Like, what are the daily duties?
Oh, there's a lot. I mean, it never stops, right? Like, it's kind of like any clergy. You sort of have to be on call for your, students, or for us, it's more of like a parent-child relationship. So if my godchildren have a problem in the middle of the night, they call me. They're not going to call me with a hangnail or something like that. But if it's something serious, they know it's like a family, and I'll be there and I'll help guide them towards whatever needs to happen in order to make the best possible situation outcome for them. So that's the big thing. But then there's daily offerings, there's things to honor the ancestors, things to honor what we call Loa and Orisha, which I think the easiest way for somebody to understand that who's not in the tradition is it's similar to gods and goddesses or even practices that some people might have with saints, but it's pretty much just honoring them with food offerings, coffee, money, candles, incense, things like that, and incorporating those practices on a daily basis. And then there's feast days and holidays and initiation ceremonies and things like that that also have to be attended to. So, and also because the structure is sort of parent child, I also have my own godparents who I have to go and be with them for feast days or help them out or things like that. So it's a lot, but what I say to people who say they don't have time for all of that, just think of it in the sense of, if I'm going to learn how to navigate these things, it'll be easier. I could not know how to cook and walk into the kitchen and I wouldn't know the difference between sugar and salt. And what I would make could be something pretty nasty. So if I learn to tell the difference between sugar and salt, hopefully we'll all be not dehydrated and eating something good.
So, is there a lot of root work with voodoo? There's a lot of
Oh,
different
definitely.
plants that you practice with.
Oh, yes, there's hundreds and hundreds of plants that I work with. When somebody comes to me and they're having an issue or a problem or something like that, I usually do a reading or a consult, and I pick from over, 200, 300 herbs and other items that might be used to help their situation. It's like medicine. Some people, this is the medicine that's going to work for them. Other people, they're allergic to that medicine and it would send them to the hospital and make them worse. So it's about using what you know about the herbs and their properties, and also using divination to what the person needs in the situation and what's the best way for them to have the best possible, life, really.
That's very awesome. Could you tell us some more about New Orleans and voodoo itself? It seems to be very popular down there. Any legends or any stories you'd like to share with us?
Oh, there's lots of voodoo legends down here. I mean, we've got the most famous voodoo priestess ever, Marie Laveau. She was an actual person who practiced here, had open rituals here, she had psychic services that said she even had Queen Victoria as one of her patrons come or get a psychic reading. I don't know if Queen Victoria was here in person, but the story is that somehow Queen Victoria got a reading. So she's sort of, I think, icon for all of us here in New Orleans but she did a lot of philanthropic things as well. It was said that her backyard was sort of a refugee camp for displaced indigenous people here in New Orleans, because obviously, as now, a lot of people were getting displaced and gentrification was happening everywhere. So that was one thing. It was said that she made psychedelic gumbo for prisoners who were on death row, which I know if I was on death row, I'd want somebody to bring me some psychedelic gumbo. It's
Yeah.
bad enough you're in prison, right? Like I might as well get some sort of enjoyment out of the day. So there were lots of things she did like that I think were, again, knowledge of roots, knowledge of plants, knowledge of things to sort of improve people's situation. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of songs about her. There's a lot of legends about her. There's all these weird things like I did a gig for a guy where my friend was painting his house and I was helping out, and he told me when he was an older gentleman, probably in his late 80s at this point. And he said when he was a Boy Scout in the 50s that they took him on a field trip out to this shack out on the lake, which was supposed to be Marie Laveau's secret hideaway. So I was like, that's hilarious to have this whole Boy Scout troop going out to find Marie Laveau when they were like, 8 or 9 years old on this pilgrimage to the great, voodoo priestess in the swampland kind of adventure. So that's fascinating. There's lots of other weird kinds of lores. There's things like if you bury your lover's name at the Ursuline convent, then, they'll always remain true to you. If you leave a shot of liquor on the bar at Jean Lafitte's, which is the oldest operating bar in the United States, then, your true love will come to you, or the name of your true love will come in a dream, things like that. So there's lots of different weird legends like that we have that, I guess have been perpetuated for centuries, but they're colorful. I can't say 100% they always work from what I've seen, but, it's worth a shot, right? Like,
So they were like the original pharmacist, voodoo priest or priestesses. They were helping people feel better, right?
definitely,
In where
definitely.
they
They
were
used to call
practicing.
them, they used to call them doctors. And I think for a lot of marginalized people, they didn't have access to decent medical care. We're still, just about, I believe, the worst medical care in the country here in Louisiana. So there's people that can't afford it. There's people that go and they're not getting quality care. So they would turn to these people who did have knowledge of roots and herbs and things like that. And I think a lot of people who aren't familiar with what we do might think that that's crazy. But then you look at something like white willow bark. White willow bark is what they use to make aspirin. So science has proven so many times that these things that spiritual people used for remedies are actually, proven scientific things when you look at it. So it's fascinating to me whenever I see things like that or whenever I hear things like that, because it's like our ancestors knew and their ancestors knew, and we sort of got this whole, oh, magic is fake kind of thing coming in. And we'll believe in the power of taking an aspirin, but not in the power of taking a tea with white willow bark or something. something like that. So for me, it's just realigning ourselves to what we knew before.
And so in voodoo itself, obviously we're talking about Hollywood kind of took like some of the negative aspects to make it more um, get more viewers. But could you tell us the fact and fiction? Give us a little bit of a rundown to help people out so they're not
Sure.
having such a negative attitude towards voodoo.
Sure. I mean, first of all, don't get your information from Hollywood movies, certainly not horror movies. They're not getting any better over the years. We look at, White Zombie being some of the earliest evidence of these kinds of voodoo crazy practices, and I have a degree, in addition to being a voodoo priestess, I have a degree in cinema studies from NYU. And when we talk about this, we talk about what the propaganda of the media did, especially Hollywood in the 30s and 40s, about sort of demonizing Black people, othering them, and sort of blowing up what the practices actually were. So making it full of things like negative magic, vengeful magic. But what I usually explain to people about that is, if you were in a situation where you were an enslaved person, you were getting beaten, you were getting assaulted, your children were being stolen, all of these things, and you knew that you had some magic that might keep you safe, that might keep your children safe, that might give you defense against people who were trying to harm you, would you use it? And most people would use it. So I think that when we think about it that way, we can kind of understand why there's a lot of things in voodoo that might be focused on what I call protective magic, and some other people might call it, hostile magic or something. But if someone's hurting me, I'm not going to sit there and just go, "Oh, please hurt me some more." I'm going to try and defend myself, and that's really
Exactly.
what it's based in. So there's those kinds of things. There's no such thing as voodoo dolls. I mean, we have voodoo dolls from
Yeah.
Celtic countries that is basically, they were puppets originally, sort of as like stand-in magic for the person who's not there. So if you're trying to do healing on someone and they're not there, you might make a little doll that looked like them, and then you would do the healing on that doll with whatever, candles, incense, herbs, oils, crystals, all of that. So but somehow voodoo got associated with these kinds of dolls. I guess we'll never really 100% know why, other than Hollywood picked up on it. Um, if we look at West Africa, Benin, the birthplace of voodoo, is right next to Nigeria. Nigeria has the largest incidence of twins anywhere in the world. And what they will
Mhm.
do is, if someone's a twin and the one of the twins dies, they'll make a doll of that twin, and that will, go to family celebrations on, Christmas or birthdays or something. The twin will be represented by that doll. So I think this might have been somehow transplanted into this crazy notions of hurting people with voodoo dolls, but that's not really a thing. You'll get people here today that'll sell you voodoo dolls, but you'll get people who will, try and scam you in the French Quarter as well. So any tourist city, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then you said about like the zombies. Obviously, they try to connect those two together. Could you give us a little backstory how you think that might have came to be?
Well, there is a formula, and Zora Neale Hurston, the folklorist and anthropologist and author that a lot of people were required to read in high school, she went down to Haiti again in the 30s and 40s, and she found out that there was a formula that they had, that what it would do is sort of put somebody in a temporary coma. It would slow their breathing, it would slow their heart rate, and they'd kind of appear dead. And people used this again as sort of a protection measure. If you were being threatened or assaulted, or by somebody in the community, they didn't necessarily have proper protection from the police or the government officials that were there. What they would do is administer this poison. It would put them in a temporary state of death, and then they would take the person, after the family had, put them in the cemetery, they would dig them up and transport them somewhere else, so that the person literally would go somewhere else, and the formula would leave them kind of confused, and they didn't remember their name or whatever. So it's kind of like amnesia. And some of those ingredients, there were roots and herbs and stuff in there, but some of the ingredients were a Caribbean fish that's similar to the puffer fish or the fugu in Japanese cuisine, which does cause, makes your tongue numb if you eat it, and if you cut it wrong, it does cause temporary paralysis and even death. So there's lots of these things, not just in excuse me, Haitian culture, but in all the world, and that's what it was used for. It was just sort of again, a protection mechanism for those that didn't necessarily have justice and fairness with things that were going on for them.
And what services would you offer clients? I know we'll be leaving the links down below for someone to reach out to you. What services do you offer, and what is your most popular services?
Well, I usually ask people to get a reading first, or a consultation about exactly what's needed in the situation. As I mentioned before, something that might help somebody might be horrible, terrible for somebody else. Again, to use food as an analogy, I know people that eat peanuts, they're in the emergency room. When I was a kid, I survived off peanut butter sandwiches. Like for like a year, I just ate peanut butter sandwiches. So there's some people that might be the one thing that they want and nourishes them, and for somebody else it might be something that goes into the hospital. So I do a consultation first to see what's best in the situation. I get people coming to me where they might want to be in a relationship or improve the relationship that they're already in, but what if that person's not the right person for them? Or what if that person's sick and they should be concentrating on their health as opposed to putting more romance in their life? So the consultation kind of helps us see exactly what we're looking at, like a doctor would when you were having a consult, and then where we should concentrate our energy about what's most important in that matter. But that said, I'll do all types of different things for people. We do cleansings, we do candles, we do gree, which are herbal medicine bags. We do, yeah, just about anything you can think of. I've done a lot of weird stuff over the years, but yeah, I've done a lot of things.
All right. And there's some stuff that you'd like to show on camera and explain how it works or what it means
Oh,
to you
sure.
in your
Oh, no, I
practice.
was just going to show my books, but there we go. That's fine too. Well, there we go. That's my Orisha's Goddesses and Voodoo Queens book that talks about the divine feminine in African traditional religions. And this is my latest book, Tarot Every Which Way, which is basically just everything you would want to know about tarot. It's tarot with recipes for tarot, and crystals for tarot, and herbs for tarot, and gardens for tarot, and musical notes for tarot, and meditations for tarot. And like, so no matter what kind of witch, how you can incorporate that into your practice and your tarot readings and things like that. So, yeah.
That's very awesome, and we'll leave the links for your books down below as well. Is there anybody basically can practice voodoo, right? Is there a way that someone could access it or meet someone to try to learn, like a mentorship?
I mean, it's an initiatory tradition. So pretty much why, yes, theoretically anybody could practice it, but you have to have a teacher. I mean, a lot of people like to say it's only for Black people or people of color, but there's always exceptions to the rule. So I don't think it should be an all white religion. I think that we end up getting into trouble because it was never an all white religion. But we all do, as I said, know people that are Caucasian or other races that do practice voodoo, but you need a teacher. So, and you need a spiritual family. So I do have a blog called Voodoo Universe. You said you're going to put the links down below. That's in my link tree, and it's the largest voodoo blog in the world. And there's 2 posts on there about how to find spiritual teachers or godparents. You should really trust them the same way, if you were picking out parents again, because these are people you're going to have to say things that might be difficult. You're going to have to share intimate information. You're going to have to trust them because they might say something that sounds really strange. It might be like, oh, put this under your bed for a week, and whatever it is. But so you have to trust them to the extent of you're going to be able to listen to them and respect them, that they know what's best and that they can guide you. So that's the first thing. And if you're thinking about it, I usually recommend going, asking people if they're in the tradition, do they have any teachers? Could you get a reading with their teacher or a consultation with their teacher to find out if that's what's best for you to move forward? Because it's not necessarily everybody's supposed to get initiation, but pretty much anybody could benefit from a cleansing or contacting their ancestors so they're just better in harmony with the universe.
So I know there's something called hoodoo. Is that like a spin-off of voodoo, like a
Very
twist of
often
it?
here in the southern US, practices were called hoodoo. Hoodoo practices are less traditional structured than voodoo or vodou practices. Voodoo and vodou practices concentrate a lot on the loa or the gods, goddesses, spirits, however you want to conceive of it, the sacred forces in the universe, literally, is what we're talking about, and honoring those on feast days, honoring those with ceremonies, honoring those with all different kinds of levels of, dedication. Whereas is primarily more practical based. Very often it uses Psalms or other passages from the Bible as part of transforming the energy in a situation and bringing about desired change. I think that's because, again, primarily enslaved people here in the US weren't allowed to read, or if they were allowed to have a book, the only book they were allowed to have is the Bible. So, very often you would find these sort of magical incantations coming from the Bible because that was the only book that they were allowed to have.
That makes sense. And the different
But
psalms, right? They have to write the
yeah,
different
yeah, yeah.
psalms down.
Right. But it's very practical. It's like, oh, if I hate my neighbor, then I take a broom and stand it on end and lean it on the wall and say this psalm, like that kind of a thing.
And so, what does magic mean to you personally? You know,
Again, that's a big question. I think probably if I was going to say something, it would be about living in harmony with the forces of nature, and that doesn't mean commanding the forces of nature. It means, as I just said, living in harmony. So trying not to take more than I use, trying to, be respectful and mindful of the earth and the people around me and the energies around me, and to, I guess I don't know. I mean, that's a big question, right? Like it's about living your best life. I think that's would be another one of my answers to that question, that it's about, but the best life specifically for you, right? Just as I said, not everybody's supposed to initiate, not everybody's supposed to be king or queen or president. Maybe you will do the most good teaching some kid who then grows up to save the world. Like, so it's about thinking of a larger picture than yourself, but also knowing that your path is the best one and the right one for you to be on in that moment.
and so like magic could be like praying, right? In a way,
Sure.
you're praying to the gods or goddesses and
Yeah.
using energy to raise the energy to make something manifest, right? You're
Sure.
manifesting from the ether.
Sure. Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. So
But
and
I
that
mean, it
was
could be like you're talking about using things. I remember we used to have this joke when I started doing rituals, and my god kids put a pot of water on the stove and then they forgot about it and it went on fire. And I was like, well, technically that's magic. If you leave water long enough with flame under it, the water will then turn into fire along with the pot and the metal and everything else in the kitchen. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a giant production with robes and sacred incantations. It can be something simple too, like leaving 3 pennies at the crossroads or leaving flowers for your ancestors and asking them to bless your life and your children's lives.
and I was going to talk about. So, is there anything you could teach someone very easily to do to improve their life, like an easy little spell or easy little prayer, that you would
I
you
would
would
go
you
to
could
your
teach someone?
ancestors. I would go to your ancestors. When I said I have a cinema studies degree, I also have an anthro degree. And I remember when I was a undergrad, like my first year, the teacher said, list all your grandparents. Who knows the names of all four of their grandparents? And it was me and this other kid who was like old money, from so he could go back. He knew all those people from like back to the Mayflower or whatever, but just getting in touch with those ancestors, they're the reason that you're here now, right? And it's their knowledge and guidance and wisdom that are responsible for you being here and moving forward, surviving and thriving. It's in their best interest to sort of help you and guide you along the way. I will say this: if you're adopted and you don't know, the simplest thing I tell people in that area is, okay, well, do you know what kind of heritage cultural tradition you're from? What are the most common names in that tradition? Like, my grandparents' names are John and Mary. I couldn't make this up, right? And so start with common names like John and Mary. Have a good yes no. It could be a pendulum that you use for yes no. You can go, I think I put this in my blog too, simple ways to do yes no. You can throw 3 pennies. 3 heads up is a yes, 3 down is a no. Any combination thereof is like a maybe yes or maybe no, and just move forward and go with your intuition and what you're getting, and maybe leave them a glass of water or light a candle or ask for their help. I'm not really big on demanding things, but asking for their help if you're having a difficult situation. Ask for their help if you're looking for guidance, and just see what happens.
And we're entering, into the Samhain now, and the spirit world is thinning. Would now probably be a really good time to contact your loved ones that passed, your ancestors, probably more than
Yeah, it's
likely.
definitely easier this time of year, especially in this hemisphere, right? Like if we're in another hemisphere, it's Beltane time. It's not Samhain time. But yes, here in this hemisphere where it's Samhain, this is a good time. This is a good time because they're just more around. And even if we look at other cultures too, right? In Mexico, we've got Dia de los Muertos, we've got All Saints Day, we've got All Souls Day, we've got all of these kinds of holidays for the dead right around Halloween and Samhain time. So this is definitely more focus is on them. And just looking at the seasons, I mean, everywhere that's not New Orleans is getting cooler, and the days are getting shorter and all of those kinds of things. So it's just the earth is sort of turning to that time where things are more introspective, and that's a time for the ancestors to come out. But they're here all year.
Yeah, because I know, like, if like a full moon, you're supposed to ask for something more, right? You want something more, something positive. So that would be the time to address your ancestor, like, hey, I need some more better health or prosperity or something like that, right?
Um, yeah, I think so. I mean, again, it's a little different the way we practice. I mean, we don't really go along moon phases, but traditional witchcraft is, yes, full moon's the best time for manifestation magic. Waning moon is for banishing magic, right? So if you're trying to get rid of something, you would wait until the moon was getting smaller, and if you're trying to bring something, you wait until it starts getting bigger. But full moons are great for anything. Although things do get weird, right? Like it's the most hospital admissions, the tides go nuts. So yeah, we're definitely guided by the moon, even if we don't want to be.
Yeah. And so you guys believe in some form of karma, correct? In voodoo, karma, right? Some
We
form of
have to
it.
have good. We have to have good character. We call it Iwapele, which isn't really a voodoo concept. It's more of a Nigerian Ifa concept. But you have to have good character, and everybody's judged on their character. Some people are just their character is to be a shady person. Like that's just it. There's a full spectrum. Some people are, born and they're just not very honest people, and they're going to have to work at that because that's not easy to go through a life where your natural inclination is to be dishonest or is to be opportunistic or things like that. But if you look at the world, there's certainly a certain percentage of people who do seem like they're born like that. So in that way, it does, sort of jive with me. But there is a code of things that we sort of go by to have good character. One of the top things that I think people don't really realize is we talk about omitutu, or having a cool head. So this not reacting in anger, not, having violent outbursts and things like that. That's something that we definitely think goes towards having good character, because you can't, if you're in that kind of anger, fury type state, you're not going to be able to see logically. So we try and be careful of that. And we have lots of sacred stories about how stuff happened when people were not in control of things. They got angry because they were drunk, or they got angry because they were, sad or alone or whatever.
Is there any particular tools you want to talk about in your craft that you use every day? If you're okay with that, tools you like to
Um,
use that
I change it up. It's hard to say, right? Like,
I know there's
um,
cigars in Florida water, right?
yes, 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 yes. In Florida water, I mean, it used to be back in the day, right? Like 300 years ago, there were lots of different, perfumes, scents, and things like that that people would blend for the different energies and aligning yourself with them. And somewhere, during the enslaved slave trade and things like that. Some of those formulas were lost. So we look at the most popular Florida water, Murray and Landman. They've been in business, I think, since 1811. So when you think about that, these people have been in business for over 200 years with this formula. And the formula is sort of a all-purpose kind of thing, an all-purpose cleansing thing. So yeah, I certainly use Florida water every day. I use pretty much candles every day. It depends on exactly what I'm doing, but there's almost always a white candle burning. And then there's things that I use specific to what I'm trying to align myself with, right? Like, so sometimes I'll use formulas for success or happiness or cleansing or protection or healing, depending on whatever's going on for the day. So that happens. Um, my ancestors get coffee, they get cigars, they smoked cigarettes, so they get cigarettes, they get beer, they drank beer, so they get things like that. It depends on what they liked, but I'm pretty much over there at least once a day, sometimes more than once a day. And then it's specific to the energies too, right? Like we were talking about Marie Laveau. Very often I'll leave Marie Laveau things that are specific to Marie Laveau. Maybe a blue candle, maybe a Rose of Jericho. You said show and tell. I think there is a Rose of Jericho behind me. Talking about spells that are easy for people. So Rose of Jericho, this one's kind of dried up, but you put it back, they call it resurrection flower. So you put water in it and it comes back to life and it blooms. And depending on, this is more of a hoodoo thing than a voodoo thing, but depending on what you put in the bowl with it, like if I put all my spare change in it for a week, then the resurrection flower will be like my finances will come back to life. If you're doing it for healing, what I've seen people do is put like beans and rice in the bowl, and then it's like your health comes back to life, right? So that's pretty much one of those things. So, but I will do this frequently for Marie Laveau. She almost always has one over there. And then other things that she was known to have. I do a lot of food offerings. I do a lot of ritual cooking and stuff like that. So
And they visit her in the graveyard, right? On her tomb, they make markings. Is that correct? And they
no,
knock,
you're not allowed to
right?
make markings.
There's like a certain
No, that's kind of
certain
like, I
thing they
mean,
do
people have
to
made
ask for
marks,
something.
but yeah, people have made marks, but you're not allowed to make marks anymore. Somebody actually, it used to be open to the public, at least during daylight hours or during cemetery hours, they would unlock the gates. But somebody who was, he had psychiatric issues, he went and painted it
Mhm.
pink. I want to say this was maybe about 10 years ago, maybe a little longer. So ever since he painted it pink, they have locked the gates. You now need a tour guide to go in there, and you're not really allowed to do anything. I did leave some flowers, but the tour guide was also like, they don't even like you leaving anything here at the grave for
Oh,
her, which is kind of
that's
sad.
a
And
shame.
I
Yeah.
know. I just looked at him. I was like, well, you can try and tell me I can't leave flowers, but I'm going to leave these flowers anyway, sir. So,
'Cause I know people asked her for healings, right? I heard a story where someone was sick and they went there and it actually they got better. Like, I
oh
mean,
yeah,
when they
people
were
ask
able
her
to do
for
the
all kinds
markings
of
and
things.
knocking.
I just
Yeah.
don't, I just don't recommend that because look, I don't know you. I mean, if somebody I didn't know came to my door and knocked on it and asked for a healing, I would tell them to go away.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
I
I
just
mean,
know
it's
that that
about,
was what they
yeah,
were
it's about
doing.
establishing a relationship with them, right? Like that's why I said I go and I leave offerings and I hope, that she'll smile on me in whatever way she chooses to, as opposed to I need this, I need that's very, that's not the relationship I have with any of my, spirits or energies that I work with. I wouldn't do
And
that
she
to my
was also a
grandparents,
hairdresser, right?
right?
She was also
Yes,
a
she was a
hairdresser.
hairdresser. Mm-hmm. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's what she was known for, that, and she did many other things too, right, for the community, helped out a lot.
Yes, she did a lot of stuff for the community. Yes, yes, yes. And I feel like she did a lot of stuff for their religion too, because, the first person to hold open public ceremony in the United States, that was not of a Christian persuasion, right? So I think that that was a huge thing. She was said to be the first person to charge for psychic services, which I also think is a big step because, we got to eat too. It's a skill. So I think that that went a long way. And as you said, she helped the community. A lot of these people, needed healing, needed advice, and I was talking about her, even putting people up in her backyard. So she certainly helped them quite a bit. And her daughter was also named Marie. So when her daughter, sort of replaced her when she wasn't well enough to still take clients and see people and stuff like that, her daughter would take clients and do readings and consultations for them and things like that. And even today, the police station still gets threatening letters signed Marie Laveau, which I think is hilarious.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, yeah.
So, is there anything else you like to discuss about your relationship with voodoo? How you're teaching? Are you doing any online courses too as well that someone could join to just get more information out of
Yeah, I'm
besides your
doing.
books and stuff?
Sure. People can always go to my website to see what's coming up. I know this is going to air later this month, but I am starting a 6-week online class series later this month in partnership with Morbid Anatomy. So that'll be exciting. I'm doing a couple of online things for Samhain season, like I always do, so people can find those. And I still also do some in-person things here in New Orleans. I do a lot of poetry readings and things like that so people can catch me.
That's very awesome. Very awesome. Any more stories you want to share with us down there? Any more legends or anything
I'm
that
trying to
might be
think.
very interesting to the audience?
We
Anything
do have
like that?
some unique, energies, spirits that we work with here in New Orleans that I don't think you find anywhere else. We've got a spirit called Annie Christmas, who again was said to be an actual person. She was said to be a steamboat driver or a keelboat driver. Some people call her Steamboat Annie. And it was said that she rescued all these people from drowning on a steamboat. But she kind of almost has a Paul Bunyan type thing happening where it said that she was like 6 feet tall and stood taller than any man. And then, if women were being abused by their partners, it said that she would go to their house and beat the men down and take their teeth and wear them as a necklace. So there's all these kinds of like, stories like that about Annie Christmas. For those of you who are in other African traditional religions, she's said to be sort of a female version of Ogun, who's a West African warrior spirit, which I think is fascinating because we don't really get that many female Oguns, especially here in the US. So that's interesting that she almost takes on this like, masculine character traditionally. So that's fascinating to me. There's lots of other, weird stories like you were talking about healings. Marie Laveau is buried in St. Louis Cemetery number 1. Across the street is the Church of St. Jude, and it has a healing grotto, which is known for people going and leaving petitions and things like that for healing. It's a beautiful little thing that you can go to. Has a holy water font. They'll sell you a bottle, an empty bottle, and you can get holy water. There's also a giant statue in there for Saint Expedite, which the story or the legend is that this statue just arrived mysteriously one year, and they ended up putting it in the church, and now people sort of pray to expedite, like expedite, right? Like, so when they want their magic to happen really quickly, they'll go and they'll put money in the box next to Saint Expedite and hope that whatever they're praying for happens soon. So those are two things I think that's very unique to New Orleans, and something that's kind of interesting that people could check out if they're going to come to town.
Yes, that's really awesome stuff. Um, any last notes for the audience? Anything you want to share with them?
I guess just don't believe the bad hype. Don't believe all the crap that you hear about voodoo. Really, it's a very, I think, sacred tradition that's about honoring our ancestors, living in harmony with nature, just honoring the sacredness in nature. When I talk about these Orisha or Loa, or gods and goddesses, as I call them, what they are in reality for us are forces of nature. So if we look at somebody like Urzuli, that's the spirit of the waterfall. So when I'm honoring this goddess who's connected to love and happiness and joy and marriage, she's also the same energy I feel when I'm standing in front of a waterfall, that amazing feeling when the mist hits your face. And that's what we're honoring, and that's what we're trying to align ourselves with. So it's not really focused on all this negativity that's just a product of the horrible things that many of these practitioners had to endure.
That's awesome. Yeah, because basically this interview is about getting people comfortable with magic, and learning about different cultures. So I'm really glad to have you on this evening, and thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff. I've been doing it for, whatever, 30, 40 years. So I'm glad to, be able to do this for the show. And if anybody really has any questions, they can reach out. You're putting my info in the thing. So, I'm always happy to talk about things, and definitely check out the blog, because there's over 400 posts on there. So chances are, if you have a question, I already wrote about it on the blog.
Awesome, that's awesome. And is there any spooky story you'd like to share? Anything that haunting or ghost related that you've encountered, well, in your magical pursuits at all?
I mean, there's been weird energies and stuff like that, but I think people are the weirdest of all. I have an ex who lived down here, and he came home and his girlfriend had stolen a skeleton out of a tomb and set it up on the couch in the living room. So people will do
Wow.
some stuff. People will do some stuff, I tell you. He left her. I haven't seen her for a while. She was in town still for a while, but yeah, people will do some crazy things. Don't rob any tombs. I don't know any ghost stories about it, but I'm sure they'll come for you if you try and steal a finger. A lot of these cemeteries around here get bones mailed back to them from tourists that have stolen stuff over the years. So horrible. I don't even know why people would do that kind of thing. But we have there's a lot of sad people, and there's a lot of hurting people, both alive and dead, in this town. So you can certainly feel it in some of these spaces. I know a lot of people are familiar with, American Horror Story and things like that. The stuff that went on in
Oh
the
yeah.
Lalaurie Mansion was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. So, you can feel those energies and stuff like that here. Um, there's so much legends and things like that in town. Even if I had a chance to take a workshop with, I want to say, I think he's the nephew of Bram Stoker, Dr. Stoker, and he talks about how Bram Stoker, when he was doing his gathering mission for finding out information for writing Dracula, he spent a good portion of time in New Orleans. So, some of these things that you see from the Dracula mythology were actually true stories that happened here in New Orleans.
That's very awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on this evening. We really appreciate having you on, and I hope everyone enjoys this interview. And everybody, have a great night.
Thank you.